You know, I'm a dedicated public servant, had no political aspiration, but serving the people, serving my state, where I call home, where I'm raising my family, that's really important to me.
Welcome to the Bailey Wire Podcast, where we open the files on the biggest legal stories in Missouri. We'll explore what these issues mean in simple terms, how they impact you, and give insight into the actions by the Missouri Attorney General's Office. Here's your host, Brandon Rathard.
It's number 2 on the list. It must be pretty danged important for a reason. Hello and welcome into the Bailey Wire Podcast. I'm Brandon Rathard, your host, joined by Missouri's Attorney General Andrew Bailey. Welcome into the show, Mr. Bailey.
Hey, Brandon. Thanks for having me on.
Glad you'd be here. It's number 2 on the list. We are talking the Second Amendment. Obviously, we know there has been an onslaught of action really over the years. People trying to do away with something that is embedded in the Constitution. Again, I go back to it's number 2 on the list for a reason, preceded only by the first. Right now, let's welcome into the show our guest, Missouri's Attorney General, Andrew Bailey. Welcome into the show.
Hey, Brandon. Thanks for having me on.
All right, glad you could be here. I want to start here. November 2022, you're working in the Parson administration. Governor Mike Parson comes to you and says, hey, we're going to have a change in the Attorney General's office. I think I want you to be that guy. What was that like for you? Have the governor come to you and say, I want you to be the state's top law enforcement official?
Well, it's always humbling when the governor looks at you and asks you to do something and requests your dedication to a task. Working for him was a privilege, and getting to be at the apex of power in the state of Missouri, through some really tumultuous times in our state's history, and being able to serve the people of the state in that capacity on the governor's team, and then having the opportunity and the privilege to lead the office of the Attorney General. You know, I'm a dedicated public servant, had no political aspiration, but serving the people, serving my state, that's where I call home, where I'm raising my family, that's really important to me.
So let me ask you this. Did you say yes right away, or did you have to go home and talk to the wife? Walk us through that, Mr. Bailey.
Yeah, there a series of difficult conversations with my lovely wife, who is a saint. We had just had a newborn child a couple years ago now, so he was still really young, and so we have 4 children, all 10 and under at that time, and so explaining to my wife that this was going to be a major undertaking. We're an office of 300 employees, 5 regional offices, litigation at all levels of state and federal court. That this is a serious undertaking of an enormous magnitude and of great import to the people of the state, and when she took time to see it in those terms and to realize that we're here to fight to protect the people of the state of Missouri, to fight and win for the principles of freedom, safety, and prosperity, and that we want our children to be able to enjoy those things like we have, she began to realize that this was a really unique opportunity. It was a privilege to get to do this job.
All right, safety, one of the things we're going to be talking about here in the Bailey Wire, our initial podcast episode of the Bailey Wire, where we want to inform Missourians about what's happening within the Attorney General's office. And before we get into some of that stuff, I want you to be as honest as possible. And I love it because whenever I say this, everybody in the room, including our first Assistant Attorney General, Jay Atkins, who's joining us on the Bailey Wire today, everybody kind of gets a little nervous, like, what are you getting ready to ask? And be as honest as you can. Was there a little bit of fear? I mean, that's a pretty hefty responsibility. The governor of the state of Missouri says, Andrew, I want you to do this. Is there some fear?
No fear. The weight of the responsibility it becomes very clear. But no fear. I'm up to the challenge. I've led soldiers in combat. I have practiced law. I've tried cases. I've argued in both municipal, state, and federal court. I've argued cases where life is hanging in the balance. I've made decisions on the battlefields of Iraq where my soldiers' lives were dependent upon me making prudent and sound decisions. So it's not something I shy away from or am afraid of. But certainly the gravity and the weight of the responsibility is very real, and it's something I take seriously.
And so I know that you've lived a life of service with what you do now, and then being in the military. Before we get into how you got into the military, what drew you to law? What was that day that you said, I want to be an attorney when I grow up?
It was as a young child, my grandfather worked in law enforcement, and he would take me to court with him when he would testify in court. And so I thought that was the coolest thing on earth, getting to work with the police to lock bad guys up. I grew up kind of in that environment, knowing that I wanted to be a prosecuting attorney. So that from a very early age, had a respect and admiration for the work that men and women in law enforcement do, and wanting to support them as an attorney seemed like a great career for me.
Yeah. Incidentally, for me, it was my grandfather too, in wanting to be of service to the state of Missouri. And everything I am is because of my grandfather. So I think that's interesting. And then, of course, you went to law school. You became a bulldog prosecutor. But in between,
well, I don't want to cut you off, Brandon. You're the host, but I do think it's worth. I want to go back a little further because maybe a lot of people don't know that Andrew Bailey is a true-born Mid-Missouri son who grew up 30 miles from here. Where'd you grow up and go to high school?
Grew up in Columbia, Missouri, in Boone County. Went to Fairview Elementary, West Junior High School, and Rockbridge High School, and then went to Mizzou in 1999 on an Army ROTC scholarship.
So at Rockbridge High School, that's when you said, hey, I think I want to be of service to America. I want to join the military.
Yeah. I think I wanted to just enlist in the Army, and my mom really was interested in me going to college, but also agreed that having some additional discipline in my life as I went to college wasn't going to necessarily be a bad thing. And so Army ROTC scholarship was a great way to go to college, also serve in the military, have that level of discipline as I matriculated through college, and also get your college paid for. I mean, it's a great way to get school paid for. In 1999, my plan was to do Army ROTC at Mizzou, go to law school, then enter the Army as a JAG officer. 9/11 happened. Those plans changed, as they did with so many people of our generation. And so, that's a day that certainly we will never forget, and change the course of history for so many people.
Well, so hold on. I just put this together. You were in ROTC at Mizzou. Were you down on the field doing push-ups during the Gary Pinkel years?
I was not on the field doing push-ups. I remember my freshman year, we were tasked with helping to make sure that people weren't smuggling alcohol into the games, and so we had to search bags.
Well, you missed one.
Yeah, that's right. Might have missed one. Might have missed more than one. I remember we did PT, physical fitness, 3 times a week on Stankowski Field, the AstroTurf field right there near Crowder Hall. In the morning, so I'd be out there in formation doing the jumping jacks, the push-ups, sit-ups, and running. And eventually we got to a world where they would allow us we would just show up once a month and take a physical fitness test. That was a lot easier to make your 8 o'clock classes. It is tough at 6 a.m. when you're out there sweated out, and then you have to race to an 8 o'clock class, and that was tough.
So I'm a little bit older than you. I did push-ups during the Woody Woodenhofer era. Mizzou football. Welcome into the Bailey Wire. I'm Brandon Rathert. Attorney General Andrew Bailey is joining us, as is the first Assistant Attorney General Jay Atkins here on the Bailey Wire. So you went into the Army, and you did 2 tours in Iraq, and I'm guessing a lot of that has shaped you as a person and as the Attorney General. 1 or 2 things that stick out from your time in Iraq?
Yeah, well, so I graduated in 2004, reported to Fort Knox, Kentucky, was assigned to Armor Branch, so I was trained on tanks. And I remember in the winter of 2004, we were out doing a field training exercise, and you've got a group of second lieutenants, most of which just graduated college, and there's still some of that, fraternity house kind of mentality. And I remember one of the non-commissioned officers, one of the E7s, came up, and he had just gotten home from his first deployment to Iraq. And he's like, hey guys, look, but you need to understand that in a few months, you will be in Afghanistan, you will be in Iraq, you'll be somewhere else. And there are 18-year-old, 19-year-old kids whose lives will be dependent upon your ability to make good decisions and your leadership. And you need to think about that as you're sitting here and how you're participating in the training that we're trying to get you through. And it sunk in really quickly. And then, I reported to my first duty station at Fort Carson, Colorado, was assigned to the last heavy armored cavalry regiment in the Army, deployed to Iraq, met my unit over there. We were staying in the Nineveh province, Iraq, and I was assigned to a armored cavalry scout platoon, 6 Bradley fighting vehicles, 30 soldiers. It was all male at the time in a combat arms branch. We lived in tents in the desert in Nineveh province, Iraq. And I remember during some of the more intense intense operations we had, we would come off mission and my head would be pounding from just the every decision, from if I go an inch left or an inch right, what does that mean? Is someone going to die or by every single decision? And there's a gravity to that, but I'm proud of the work we did. My platoon was selected to participate in the largest offensive operation of 2005 to clear the city of Tal Afar, Iraq from insurgent control. And we've for 30 days fought city block by city block in the middle of town. And the intensity of that situation, and you learn a lot about yourself and about leadership skills. And those are directly applicable to the work I do now leading the Missouri Attorney General's office.
Well, and so just to add to that briefly, I remember something that puts this job in perspective for me was I remember very early on in your administration when you and I were on somewhere in Missouri on a road trip, and just kind of getting to know each other and talking about that. And we deal with a lot of incoming in this office and issues and that come from every direction, and we are making decisions 100 times a day. And I remember you telling me a story about in that operation in Nineveh Providence in Tal Afar, I think, when you were in a Bradley fighting vehicle, fighting block by block, and there was supposed to be air support that was going to kind of clear the way for you guys. I wasn't in the Army. I'm not using the right words here. I'm an old sailor. We stayed on ship most of the time. But and I remember you telling the story of you got all these soldiers in the back of your Bradley. You're getting ready to dismount and go fight block by block, and the air support didn't come through for some reason, and you guys are sitting there in an alley, and you can hear the bullets pinging off the armor of the Bradley, and just thinking to yourself, well, if that air support doesn't get here before the guys show up with the RPGs, we're going to be in a real world of trouble. And that gives a lot of perspective to me it puts in perspective some of the stuff that we deal with every day. And it always helps me to remember, like, no matter how bad of a day I'm having, Attorney General Andrew Bailey has lived through worse days.
Yeah. Well, that was, we had called in an airstrike, and the aircraft was supposed to drop a JDAM on a specific target, and then we were going to roll through the neighborhood and assault the neighborhood. And the airstrike was supposed to initiate the assault. We were waiting. Bullets are pinging off the turret of the vehicles. And you never wanted to stay in one place for too long, because they would set up ambushes with RPGs and coordinated mortar strikes. And so you want to, in the armor world, the mantra is shoot, move, and communicate. You never want to sit in one place for too long, because you become a target. And we're waiting. They did drop a JDAM, and it didn't go off. So we had to call in a second airstrike, which just, kind of delayed us sitting there taking incoming for a few more minutes, but all good.
Then your time in the military, how does that parlay to what you do now as Missouri's top law enforcement official?
Well, I think knowing how to lead people and manage people and systems to success, take care of people, accomplish the mission. And that's what we do here at the Missouri Attorney General's office. One of the things I learned in the Army is that you always inspect what you expect. We try to be present. The leadership team here in the administration tries to be present at the regional offices and be engaged in the work our attorneys and our support staff are doing, to show them not only that we care, but there's a standard of excellence that we all want to meet, and finding ways to motivate people to meet that standard. And I think we've done that in the past year. We're fighting and winning for the people of Missouri, and I think our staff's excited about that. The people of the state of Missouri are excited about that.
Attorney General Andrew Bailey, Missouri's Attorney General, 2 tours in Iraq, came home, law school, went on to become a county prosecutor in Warren County. What is it that you enjoyed about your time as a county prosecutor?
Yeah, I was an assistant prosecutor in Warren County, Missouri, and it was fantastic. It was everything I'd ever dreamed of. Getting to work with law enforcement on a day in and day out basis to keep the community that I was a part of safe. There's just it's a great team atmosphere. You have a vested interest in doing the right things for the right reasons. Had a great boss, Kelly King. Worked with some great people. Kathy Hogue was a good colleague of mine, and I've gotten to, her late father was a real paragon of criminal prosecution in the state and at the federal level too. And so getting to work with some great people and just learn about the community, plug into the community, it was fantastic. I mean, it was just a great job, and I look back with a lot of fond memories.
By the way, in one of our upcoming episodes of the Bailey Wire, Kelly King, who Andrew Bailey worked for, now works here, and I think that's going to be an interesting dynamic to talk about.
I think that's going to be very interesting. I'm looking forward to listening to that podcast.
Oh, no. Can't wait for that episode. We saw January of 2023, when you were sworn in, we saw you and your lovely wife and the kids, and the youngest kept poking and prodding about everything. Tell us about your family.
Yeah, so I would have been a prosecuting attorney in Warren County for the rest of my life, but in order to make ends meet, you have a couple different jobs. I was the attorney for the county juvenile office. It broke my heart that there were kids in foster care that didn't have a home to go to for Christmas, and that motivated my wife and I to become foster parents. We've adopted children out of the foster system, and when you go from no kids to multiple kids overnight, all of a sudden you're looking at your grocery bill and your insurance bill and every other bill and realized needed a different job in order to make ends meet. Came to work at the Missouri Department of Corrections on June 1st, 2018, the day Governor Parson took office, and he was building out a staff and eventually saw me and pulled me up to be on his staff, and it was a privilege to get to work for the governor, in that capacity for almost 4 years. But my wife and I now have 4 children, an 11-year-old daughter, a 10-year-old son, a 5-year-old son, and a young son that will be 2 in May. So he's getting up there, but I'm still changing diapers, when I'm home and doing that kind of stuff.
And we've fact-checked that statement. That is true. The Attorney General still changes diapers on a regular basis. What do your kids think about Dad being the Attorney General? Dad used to work across the street in the Parson administration. Any interesting stories from your kids' perception of what Dad does?
My 5-year-old used to come to the Capitol building to visit me. He called it the castle. And so he just knows Daddy works at the castle with the governor and would love to come to the as he called it, the castle, and check out the museum on the first floor of the castle. And so when I got appointed to the Attorney General's office by statute, the AG is at the Missouri Supreme Court building, which is also a beautiful building and a lot of history. But when my 4-year-old showed up, he said, "Well, Daddy, you don't work at the castle anymore." I mean, it's almost like he sees it as a demotion. So, we try to protect them from some of the negativity that's out there. Some of the hot button issues that we have to talk about at work, are not always age appropriate. And so we try to protect them from some of that. And certainly, I think they're proud of what their dad does. Hopefully they're proud of what their dad does. And hopefully I've expressed to them why it's important for me to do this job for them and for their peers and for, my neighbors and their neighbors and their children and grandchildren. This isn't about Andrew Bailey. This is about the people of the state of Missouri and subsequent generations and their ability and access to freedom, safety, and prosperity.
It's Missouri's Attorney General, Andrew Bailey, here on the Bailey Wire today. First Assistant Attorney General Jay Atkins. Before you go, you worked in the previous administration. Anything interesting, and not to compare, but you talk about an administration in the Attorney General's office. What kind of an adjustment is that for somebody like you?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it is an adjustment. I would say I started my legal career as a line attorney in the Attorney General's office. So I was a prosecutor under General Jay Nixon and then under General Koster before I went on to a different career. And it wasn't until the pandemic that I came back under Attorney General Schmidt as General Counsel. And General Schmidt left a legacy of excellence, as A.G. Bailey says, and he did great work while he was here. And probably one of the best things about my job and one of my favorite things about working in this administration is that there was absolutely no downtime between the two administrations. Andrew Bailey came in and from day one just picked up the ball and started running with it, and not only finishing out some of the great work that General Schmidt had done, but then undertaking a lot of our own projects in those same areas that Andrew just talked about, the freedom and prosperity and safety. Those are kind of the watchwords of the office, and General Bailey just absolutely picked up where Schmidt ran off and or left off, and then amplified that great work as well as just leading initiative after initiative after initiative within this office and his administration to accomplish the same thing. So it's been a privilege of my life to certainly to serve as General Bailey's first assistant, but just coming back to the Attorney General's office and being able to serve the people of Missouri in this capacity has just been an absolute treat.
Freedom, prosperity, and safety. We'll wrap up this week's edition of the Bailey Wire right there with First Assistant Attorney General Jay Atkins and Attorney General Andrew Bailey. Gentlemen, we want to thank you for your time on the show today.